Kelly. Welcome, everyone. I see a lot of consortia leads, directors. If your lead or director for your consortia is not on today and you are one of the district members from your consortia, please share the PowerPoint, and then we'll later have the archived version out with the recording because this is a quick turnaround. And with that, let's begin. So I'm going to go over really quickly kind of the funding calendar, why we're doing kind of this revision from the May revise, what are the allocation reduction steps that you have to take. We'll talk a little bit about decision making. We'll talk a little bit about the recommendation that CDE and the Chancellor's Office have proposed. Veronica will take us through the NOVA processing. And then I'll return to say what happens if you miss the deadline. And then, as always, we'll try to answer questions during the webinar at certain key moments. If not, and we have some time at the end, we can go back and see if we can answer any of the questions we missed. So with that, let's talk about kind of the timeline for the funding. So the way this works is in January, the governor delivers by the second week of January, sometimes the first week, a proposed budget. So this year's budget had a COLA for $18 million or so on top of the money that we got last year. So then we, at the state level, released the preliminary allocations, which came out in February. And then you had your meetings in March and April. And then you submitted your CFAD in the beginning of May. But the second week of May, the governor came out with a revision, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. And so what we have to do is get that revision back to you, get you to approve it. Governor will sign the budget, or actually the legislature passes the budget in June, and then the governor signs it July 1. And then we start processing these funds and start getting out first installment by August, and then hopefully every subsequent month. And I know sometimes that doesn't happen in August, but that's what we shoot for. Okay, and so the second part of the calendar, this is at the state level. So going from when the legislature passes the budget in June, then the governor signs it. Usually in July, we get a Board of Governors approval to spend that money. And then we create a state-level interagency agreement to transfer like 89% of that funding, or maybe a little bit less because it's fiscal agents and direct funded members, but transfer, say, like 60% or so over to CDE to give that out to K-12 fiscal agent, county office fiscal agents, and K-12 and county office direct funded members. And once we get that process, then in August, those installments go out. They go to from state controllers, they go to the county offices, and then from county offices to the districts. Where this sometimes breaks down is if the interagency agreement needs to be modified, or if the state system prior to going to controllers requires additional work. And that's kind of what we saw last year. The state implemented a new system that required probably another couple of months to process this. And the interagency agreement did take some time between agencies. And so that's where it can break down. But if all things are normal, this is kind of how the process works. So moving into the May revise. So as everyone is affected by this, not just our program, but all programs, there was a cost of living adjustment from 3.46 down to 3.26. And so that adjustment resulted in a decrease of that 18 million or so by 1,043,000 to our amount. So what we had to do is reprogram and decrease everybody by that proportionate share. So going back to the formula that we use, there's a percentage how we split out all the funding. And so you would get your proportionate share of the reduction. And that's kind of what we did in NOVA. I think the next slide says, yeah. So what we did yesterday, we went in, or I went in, and reduced each consortia's 1920 allocation in NOVA. And you can see that reduction in the spreadsheet that was in the newsletter, and we direct emailed you that sheet as well. And so now, and the reason why we're having the webinar today is each consortia and their members must go in and certify the new allocation amounts for the members. And you have to have some kind of discussion of who's going to take that hit, how it's going to be, reduced among members. And so that's kind of the process up until June 30th that you'll be working through. Now, hopefully, since you already went through this process to get to the May 2nd CFAD submission, hopefully it wouldn't be too much trouble, because we're talking over 50 consortia have less than $10,000. So the larger ones, definitely a little bit more, but hopefully it's not too much of a discussion item and that you've already figured it out. Moving forward into the decision making. So we kind of revisited this before with the initial CFAD submission and certification, and this is just to clarify. So per the Ed Code, members receive no less than the prior year, and so that would still apply in these circumstances unless they are reduced for cause. And you know, there's 3 causes that are listed in Ed Code for consortia member reduction. And so going forward with this exercise, everybody still gets prior year amount unless they were reduced for cause or unless they agreed to it and everybody was on board with that. That additional amount, that COLA, in addition to the reduction of the COLA, which is still more than the prior year amount, you've got to follow your consortia bylaws and how to make those decisions. And so that's where some consortia maybe didn't have clear enough bylaws, or the voting or the decision making hadn't been clarified. And so hopefully you've worked through that. You'll continue to work through that. Remember, along with the Ed Code 84905, which covers decision making, you also have to follow Brown Act regarding public meetings. We did have some questions come up during the initial phase of the CFAD related to Brown Act. And so what we do is, if there's a Brown Act question, you'd have to go back to your local legal counsel to get their opinion on Brown Act for public meetings. And so with that, let's see, what's the next slide? Okay, before we talk about the recommendation, any questions on the slides that I've shared so far? We'll pause there for a second. We'll take a breath, and we do have some questions, I think. Neil from Proul in Yosemite. How do we update fiscal declarations for the change? So if you're going to, and maybe Veronica, she can cover this as well. When you go into the CFAD, you do have an opportunity to change your fiscal structure, and you could have done this during the CFAD, the original CFAD submission. And so that would be the process. Now, I'm not sure in an allocation amendment if you still have the same ability to change the fiscal structure, but that would be something you could take offline with TAP and follow up with. But you did have the ability at the original CFAD submission to decide whether you're direct funded or having a fiscal agent. Okay, so Bronca says, hi Neil, can you explain the thinking process about deciding that it is June 2nd as a due date? What if the state gives us a little more money in the final version of the budget? Well, we could wait till July 1st, then you would get your money probably in May of next year. And so the way the interagency agreement works, I mean, when we got the CFAD done in May, we still didn't get that money out until the end of the year or into January. And so the longer we delay, the longer it takes for the money to get to the districts. And it's unfortunate because it's the K-12 district fiscal agents and county office fiscal agents and direct funded county offices and K-12s that suffer. And so we want to minimize that suffering and get this money out as soon as possible. So hopefully everybody can get in by June 30th. Michelle says we have Stephen. Oh, okay. Sorry, that's just. And Sequoia says we have a way through members clicking approval in Nova for the CFAD. We stopped on it so we can do a review. Okay, so that's a technical question. Maybe we'll wait for Veronica to answer that. Okay, and then approval said yes. We updated with the CFAD, but now with this reduction, we need to update, and I will take this offline with tab. Okay, great. All right, and then Kristen from Salinas Valley. So community college fiscal agents won't be affected by delays. Technically, no, because that money, so the money, the way the funding works, the money, the legislature gives it to the chancellor's office for some reason. Then the chancellor's office has to do an interagency agreement to give that money that belongs to the K-12 fiscal agents and county office fiscal agents and their direct funded districts to CDE. And because it's a interagency agreement and technically a contract, it gets caught up in the state contract process, which takes a long time. And then we have the state fiscal system, which is new, that we have to enter in for a contract, and it only goes up to about $100,000 per contract. So we have to do this multiple times. And so with a community college fiscal agent, the money just goes directly out, and it's been going out in August since the beginning of the program. So that's what we're trying to fix, but there wouldn't be any delays. Okay, I'm going to move on to the next slide because this could be interesting. So now this is just a recommendation. So I'm going to go to the second bullet and say, prior to reading the recommendation, we understand this is a local decision and members would have to decide who should take the reduction using the same decision-making process used in the initial CFAD certification. But if you're out of ideas and looking for some suggestions or recommendations, the Chancellor's Office and CDE would recommend that you go into Nova, go to Q2, and look at who has not spent their 17-18 CAPE funds, meaning who has 17-18 carryover, and have them take the reduction, making sure that that reduction doesn't go below their prior year funding amount. And so you have some slides on how to do that, but I guess we can go in there unless we have questions. I think we're good. Okay. So if you want to look at this, I have the verbiage and then I also have the slides. But so what you do is you go into Nova, you click on CAPE, you click on fiscal reporting, you go to the FIFO button, which is at the top of the screen. You click on FIFO, you make sure it's in 1819, and you click, make sure you click on member agency. And then you select those districts in your consortia and you look to see at the bottom of the page there's a table and it breaks it out by funding year, and you can see if somebody has any 17-18 remaining funds. So here's a couple of screenshots. Okay, so here's Nova. If you haven't seen Nova, this is the login. Okay, if you're seeing this for the first time, then you better get up to speed pretty quick. Okay, so now you're into Nova and you click on CAPE, and then you click on fiscal reporting, and then up pops the fiscal reports, and then that button says view report. That's the FIFO report. That's a critical report. So once you click on that, then up comes the FIFO report with some choices. So you want to make sure the year is 18-19, the reporting level is member agency, and then I just selected the first one, ABC. Nothing against Pauling, it's just easy ABC. And so we selected that member agency, and then after that, it'll bring up, if you scroll down below, once you select them, we'll have the chart. Now, some people are visual. I'm not kind of a visual guy. I like to see the chart. So I go down below to the chart, and I look at, 16, 17. So when you look at the years, 16, 17 through 18, 19 is really the 16, 17 funding. 17-18 through 19-20 is really the 17-18 allocation or funding. 18-19, same thing. So it looks like they've spent all their 16-17 funds, they've spent all their 17-18 funds, and they have a good proportion of the 18-19 funds, which are, we haven't finished yet. So they're doing a good job. And so we wouldn't recommend that they get cut. And so that's the recommendation. If you want to use this, this is the process that you could go into Nova and check that out. So let's see if before we turn this, okay, I think I jumped ahead. Okay, I think I might have, this could be Veronica's part. Is this right, Veronica? Is this where you come in?
Yes, it is.
Okay. All right, I'm going to turn it over to Veronica. I'll try to answer any additional questions in the chat. Take it away.
Okay, thank you, Neil, so much. And I've answered a few questions as well. So if there's any clarification needed, please just let me know. So everyone, I'll take you through the allocation amendment process, which is pretty similar to what you all do whenever you want to amend your application, your allocations throughout the year. So I'm going to turn on the arrow. If a couple of people could just let me know if you see this arrow. We received feedback that using this may be a little bit more helpful when we're doing these demonstrations off of screenshots versus the actual Nova system. Okay, good. So everyone's able to see it at this time. So when you're in Nova, so Neil showed you the Nova logon page. So once you have entered into Nova, if you scroll down to your allocation section on the consortium page, this is the area that you'll be working in to reallocate the your monies to take your total remaining line item down to 0. So once you're on the allocations page, the primary contact, so whomever the primary contact of the consortium is, they would select the continue amendment button. So it will say either continue amendment if you started this process, or it will say start amendment. So in this case, we're going to click on continue amendment here, and you will receive an error message that will come up, and it will just notify you that you are going to start the allocation process and that all members will have to approve the new allocations in order for the changes to take effect. So this is the error message that you'll see up top, and you would select either continue or cancel. If you select cancel, it'll cancel out what you are trying to do. If you select continue, then you'll move on to the allocation process. Now, once you are here in the allocation process, I do know that this the screenshots say 2018-19, but we are talking about 2019-20. And so for most people, what they have here under total remaining, there's a negative number. And so that's what we're going to redistribute, so that that negative number will now become 0, because in order for this to go through completely, this number here has to be 0. So on the next slide, what you're going to do is, this is your fiscal declaration page, not your fiscal declaration page, but your member allocations page. And so what you want to do is just redistribute the funds so that this bottom number, the total remaining, will be 0. Now, before submission, it's going to ask you if you want to provide any commentary to your members. So in this section, you'll be able to explain maybe what's going on, what the reductions are, if you want some type of record, or you want them to know what's going on prior to. You're able to type in any comments here to let them know what it is exactly that you are doing. And then once you have done this, you would press OK, or you can press cancel. Again, when you press cancel, you are going back, you are reverting the process, and it's going back to its original status. This next page, once you have pressed OK, your status will then go into submitted. So then at that point, all of your members will receive an email stating that you, the consortium primary contact, have completed an amendment process, and you are asking them to approve the amendment process. So everyone will be in awaiting approval. Now, if you're getting to the January 30th time frame and your members have not approved your allocation amendments, you can send them a reminder through the Nova system alerting them that they need to approve the allocation amendment. You can do that by selecting it here. The members are also able, if for some reason the system blocks the email or they didn't receive it, your members are able to go into Nova and actually go in Nova at the bottom of the allocation amendment screen, there's a button that says pending approval. They can select that to get to this page to see that they are awaiting approval and that they need to approve. So if for some reason they don't receive the email, they're able to go into the system that way to approve their status. So they don't have to have the email. There are two ways that you're able to do that. And then on this page, it's bringing us back to the pending approval that I was just talking about. So again, if they did not receive the email but still need to approve, then they will come here and then it'll take them to the approval page. And so once they've selected that, we're back at the approval page. So they have two options to reject or approve. For one of the consortia, I believe it's John Warner of Sequoias, if you, in the original CFAD, if all of your members did not approve the original CFAD, please direct one of them to reject the CFAD, and that will take it to the original process. So you wouldn't do an allocation amendment for your consortium, you would be submitting the first CFAD. So if there are consortia who did not approve the first CFAD, just instruct one member to reject it, and then it will take it back to its original status. Here you can see one member has rejected the CFAD. Again, it takes it back to the original status. So then the consortium primary contact will have to come in and they would have to make at least one change to the numbers and then resubmit the CFAD in order for it to take effect. And then again, once you go through this allocation amendment, if someone does not agree with the revised allocations, they do have the right to reject. And once they reject, it goes back to the original status. So your bottom line number here, your total remaining, will go back to a negative, whatever the number is. And that means that the primary contact will have to go in and make at least one change to the numbers in order for the CFAD to you'll start the process, the allocation amendment process over again. So here, if for some reason you go through the allocation amendment process and you start it over again, but you want to cancel it out completely in its entirety, you can select the cancel button. And then you'll receive this warning, are you sure you want to cancel the CFAD amendment? In that case, you would either cancel it or do not cancel it. If you cancel it, all of the numbers revert back to its original status with the total remaining at a negative number. And then you'll have to go through the process again of reallocating. If you choose to not cancel, then you will continue on with the process. And then on this screen, once all of the changes have gone through, then this total remaining number will now be 0. And those are all of the screenshots that I have for the allocation amendment process. It's pretty simple and straightforward. It's kind of like your traditional allocation amendment that you have the opportunity to do throughout the year. However, you just have the continue amendment button versus the start amendment button for the 2019-20 allocation amendment process. And if throughout any of this process, if you have any questions, definitely feel free to contact TAP and we can walk you through the process. We can send you written instructions or we can go through the process with you over the telephone. I'm looking in the
Veronica, we do have one question from Kristen, Salinas Valley. So just to clarify, we do not go into the CFAD section in NOVA. Instead, we go into the allocation section and do an allocation amendment. And we do not actually resubmit the CFAD if it's already submitted. Correct?
That is correct. If the consortium has submitted the CFAD prior to this change, then yes, you would go to the allocation amendment section of the of NOVA on the consortium page. However, for those consortia who did not submit the original CFAD, you will go through the original CFAD process to allocate your monies to all members.
Okay, great. All right, so here's our last slide. So if you've been holding back questions and you have Veronica on the call today, and you can ask her all kinds of questions about NOVA or you can ask me questions about the policy or the inner workings. But here's kind of the final slide that might be interesting. So what happens if you miss the new deadline of June 30th? So because of that interagency agreement and state agency processing and the fiscal systems at the state level, we have to have everything in by June 30th. So what happens if my consortium members don't certify by then? So the state will just go ahead and process your certification, and we'll use a proportional share to reduce the funding in NOVA. And so what we'll do is we'll say, okay, let's look at what's the percentage of everybody that's getting the allocation in the current CFAD, or if you didn't do a CFAD, we'll look at last year, and we'll get a percentage, and then we'll just do the cut based on that. Because we have to have this information in the interagency agreement. And so, I mean, that gives you 30 days or more to kind of work out those differences. But at that point, we do have to have that CFAD approved. Now, if you're a fiscal agent, you can go back in and amend it and change it, but you got to do that before money starts going out. You know, money comes to the fiscal agent. You have 45 days to get it to the members. And so, and then you have Q1 reporting. So technically, you could spend a little more time on that as a fiscal agent, even if you certified it, and you could do an allocation amendment if you wanted to change your mind. Because with the fiscal agent, we just take the total amount. We don't have to have the member breakdown. But then you start getting into the quarterly reporting and things like that. And so you don't want to spend too much time, but you do want to make that amendment pretty soon, probably by the end of summer. So with that, and then before we get to, Veronica can cover that at the end. We'll see if anybody has any questions. So I think Ryan, I see Ryan, let's see. Okay, thank you, Peggy. So Ryan said, when will the new allocations be populated in NOVA? Okay, so has anybody checked NOVA rate lately? Let's see, I'm going to do this. I'm going to have audience participation. Is your reduction in NOVA right now? And everybody's saying yes. Okay, so Ryan, it's in there, and you can go into NOVA and get all your friends and family or your member districts to approve once you put in how you're going to allocate that reduction, and then away you go. So it looks like most everybody is aware of the reductions being into NOVA. And if you weren't, now you know. Okay, any additional questions? Okay. And as you can tell, most of this is like less than $10,000. Some cases it's less than $5,000. And then Paul has a follow-up question just on funding. He says 17-18 funds can be spent through December 31st, 2019. So when they report Q4, if a corrective action box comes up because you haven't spent those funds by the target, the member would enter, why they haven't spent the funds by the 2-year target, and then how they plan to liquidate funds in the next 6 months. And then you do have the ability to spend those funds through the end of the year. But there's no extensions. We close those funds out. As you know, for 16-17, the Q2 March report, we close out, and we closed out 16-17. So next year we'll be doing the same for 17-18. We'll be closing out those funds. And so you can, with corrective action, spend them through the end of the year. Okay. Really small, the funding, okay. Sequoia says, when do we get to redistribute funds from the consortia that are not spending their old funds? So good question. So you should have bylaws in your consortia that, and I know some consortia have this like at 18 months, some have it at a year, some have it at 2 years. I mean, the target that we recommend is 2 years, but some consortia say that's too short because at the end of 2 years, I only have 6 months to spend those funds. So some consortia have chosen 18 months to relook at spending, and then if people aren't spending at the 18-month mark, then they turn around and reallocate because another bundle of funds are coming in, kind of like we're doing with 1920 funds. And so really that's up to, right now, up to the consortia. Now that doesn't mean the state could come in and be heavy-handed and implement, some kind of mandate, but we haven't done that yet. So we're allowing you guys to work this out at the local level. Okay, so let's see. Ashley, can you please make this Q&A a PDF for reference? And I think, Veronica, how would we make the Q&A or the chat? Do we include the chat in the archive recording? Is that how it works?
Yes, the chat is included in the archive. If they would like a transcript, then we can download the chat and turn it into a written transcript as well.
Oh, great. Okay. Maybe we could post that when we post the recording. That would be awesome.
Okay.
Okay. So Marianne asked, will there be any instruction for closing out data and accountability funds? So technically, probably not. I mean, if you want, we could probably walk you through it and just briefly. So the data and accountability funds are in the old system. I just spent this morning sending out the last few emails to people with the passwords. And if I notice these people have retired or their emails are bouncing back, I will forward the email to the director or lead of the consortia saying, please go in and update your district profile. And so once you have the logon and the password, you just go into the file, make sure you select the right name of your consortia, and sometimes it might be under a college or could be under a K-12 or a county office if those were the data and accountability fund holders. And then you would select the grant, and it's a triple-digit grant, so not a two-digit grant. And then it'd take you to the grant, and you'd go in and update the district profile, changing the names, phone numbers, emails, stuff like that. So when you've done all that, by the end of July, you just go back in, click on Report To, enter your expenses, add your summary. Your summary should just be a high-level summary of how you did with your work plan objectives. And then you submit that, and then at the end of August, you do a final. And then at that final, you would also submit a practice with promise related to data and accountability. So pretty simple, but we can walk you through it once you get to that point in the process. So let's see. So Marianne, okay. So Paul says, thanks, just trying to clarify. Oh, okay, CD, okay, gotcha. So it's just a recommendation. I know technically you can spend those funds, but it's just an idea to come up with a decision-making process to reduce those, to handle the reduction. Okay, and let's see, Elaine, data funds N630 are encumbered funds okay for expenditure in July. So Elaine, I leave it up to the accounting office that's holding the funds. If they're comfortable with when they submit the expenditures in July and they submit the final, that as long as they're comfortable with telling us that all the funds are expended, we're not going to look to see, oh, that was a purchase order that was processed on July 1. And I mean, really, that's up to the accounting office to decide, what does expended mean? And when you submit that report on July 31st, you're certifying that. And then when you submit this final report on August 26th, you're certifying that everything's done. And so I'll leave that up to you and the local accounting offices to determine, their process for liquidating funds and purchase orders and encumbrances and stuff like that. So I'm going to give you some flexibility there, Elaine, and I'm going to kick that can down the road a little bit. Okay, so Kristen, oh, a lot of questions coming in. Let me see if I can get that one. Kristen, are you going to do a final webinar on closing out DNA? No, we'll probably. I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory. People have already done it. But if you need help, you can contact TAP, and we can walk through it. It shouldn't be that much, and so we'll take it from there and see, on a case-by-case basis. How soon can we submit the final report? So Emma, we approved your second report today. We can approve the final today as well. And you can submit your practice with promise today as well. So Emma is one of the maybe 5, I think Sacramento or Capital. I want to say, who else? There's a few other ones that have already submitted their data and accountability report. So if you're ready, you can close it out now. I think Gavilan has submitted it. There's like 5 right now. Okay, so Marianne and Kristen, we can set up something special for you. Anybody else, let us know if you want us to walk you through the data and accountability. We can do a special webinar. So please let us know. So Diana is talking about completing the evaluation. And Kathy says, what is the due date for budget revisions of data and accountability? So we'd like to get that in by mid-June, June 17th. I'd like to get it sooner if you can. I'm going to be on vacation starting June 24th. And so if that's a good indicator, because I don't know who's going to be looking at this when I'm on vacation, but get those revisions to me the week before, because nobody will be looking at this, and it'll sit there and we'll have to play catch up when I get back. And Kelly said, I may need help on the revised budget plan for DNA. It's been a long time. Sure, we can do some one-on-one, or we can do a webinar, whatever you want to do. So we can help you, Kelly. And Christy says, can we submit all remaining parts at once? Sure. Well, you have to. So the way it works, Christy, you have to submit report 2. We approve it. Then you have to go in and submit the final. We approve it. Then you go in and submit the practice with promise through the website. So there's subsequent approval, but it usually takes less than a few minutes. If I'm near my emails, I can make that process work within 10 minutes. Okay. So Eileen, I will not be answering any email. I'm going to places that have no internet connection. I'm going into Utah National Park, so there is no Wi-Fi, nor will I be bringing my laptop. So you guys are on your own for a little bit. Okay. Okay, maybe I won't. Maybe I'll get trapped. Maybe my arm will get stuck in a rock, and I'll take time to come back, and I'll, have some damage or something. Who knows? Anyway, okay. So, any additional questions, Veronica? Do you want to cover the last 2 slides? But before we end it, we still have time. So, once you cover those slides, we want to see if anybody has additional questions.
Okay, sounds good. So as Diana mentioned in the chat pod, as well as the URL that I posted, please be sure to submit any requests you may have, whether you need help submitting your NOVA stuff, or you'd like to locate a document or a webinar, whatever the case may be. Just reach out to TAP, and we are more than willing to assist you in whatever your needs are. And so, yes, you can submit a support request, you can give us a telephone call, or you can submit an email. We are available to assist. And then here, our upcoming webinars and in-person trainings. We're finishing off Jay's Deep Data Dive, and then we have a couple of more webinars, one being on the planning mindset. So please be sure to tune in for those. We will also be rolling out our fall PD offerings next month, so please be on the lookout for those PD offerings that will take you through the end of fall. If your consortium is having a PD day and you would like TAP or one of our partners to present there, so CASAS, OTAN, or AIR, you would like us to do workshops at your upcoming PD days for the fall, please be sure to reach out to us and we would definitely coordinate those workshop efforts so that you have a robust offering of professional development at your PD days during the fall. So that's all I have. Are there any other questions?
Yeah, I think there's one. Karen, so just to be clear, after reducing the allocations, we should once again have our consortia approved in a public meeting, correct? And I would say because it's a budget item and it is a decision, I think you could get Brown Act interpretation from legal counsel, but it sounds like that would have to be in a public meeting setting. So that's why we've given you to June 30th, because I know it takes time to set those up. So if you already have some meetings scheduled, try to tack this on, following the protocols and all that good stuff. So yes, I would recommend holding this in a public meeting setting. Just quickly on the data and accountability. So just remember all the work plans. So if you go into NOVA and you go into your consortia and you look at consortium members and you look at all those files, if you scroll down, you'll find your original data and accountability budget and you'll find your original data and accountability work plan. And so unless you change that, that's going to be the document that you'll be following for the final report and the closeout and all that stuff. And so if you have changed it dramatically, you will want to resubmit, and that would just be uploading the new work plan. Or if you're doing a major budget modification, you would upload the new budget using the same template because it's not online. And so, and then you would have to go into the old system and do that budget revision. So it's a little more complex than NOVA, but if you are going to do a budget revision for the data and accountability funds, and we could walk you through that, get you set up for that, but do that in the next 2 weeks if you can. And if you want to look at your work plan, so if you're going to write your summary for your report 2, you could go back to your work plan and look at the objectives. Some people did 4 objectives, some people did 5, some people did 3. You can just do a write-up on how you covered those objectives. And then the final report, there's no summary. You just, if there's any changes, you make those modifications. Otherwise, you just submit again. And then don't forget, we have a Practice with Promise data and accountability site set up that everybody can submit at least one data and accountability promising practice. So with that, we'll see if there's any additional questions. Okay. Aaron has a meeting on June 20th. Good. Okay. Oh, thank you, Veronica. Supporting document section is where you'll find your data and accountability plans. Okay, so with that, we still have about 5 minutes or so. Veronica, is there anything else you want to tell anybody about? Let's see. Oh, for consortia directors, we're working on dates, but don't forget the consortia director leads meeting in September. I don't know if that's a firm date, but it's sometime in September, like we've had every year. Some have been early October, some have been mid to late September. So we'll get that once we get that finalized. It'll be in Sacramento at the Sacramento County office. For those of you who have been out to the tap room, so to speak, there at Mather Field. It'll be in the auditorium there. And so we'll have the agenda and confirmation soon. We're also working on the summit. So get your proposals in as soon as you can. Don't delay. We've come up with a lot of great proposals. We're reaching out to a lot of people. So that's at the end of October. Pins and registration will be set up soon. And Veronica just listed the proposals. They're now available. And thanks, Diana and Veronica there. So don't forget about that. And what else? I don't know, Veronica, am I missing anything?
No, I think you have covered it. Those are the next two big events happening for CAP.
Okay. And then we're wrapping up, what is it, AB 2098, immigrant integration should have a report out probably at that September meeting of what we're looking at. We are making some policy changes to our data collection. So we'll be kind of revising some of our program definitions so it's less confusing. When you report your data, we'll define how we're going to track service hours or if we're going to track service hours. A lot of this came out of the program area exercise, and that's a good heads up. So those program area reports are still going to be needed to be completed, and we have for 1819, we'll have the estimates due in September, and we'll have the actual final certification by program area in December. So that'll be for program areas by program, program hours by program area, and then expenses by program area. But I think based on your feedback that class gave us, we're going to cut down on all the categories. I think we're just going to have maybe 4 or 5 program areas. And for expenses, we're just going to focus on the ones in the legislation and make that mandatory. If you want to do optional other stuff, we can. But we're going to try to simplify that process for you. So that we're working on right now. We should have some information out this summer for you. And so also Jay Wright and I will begin our training for data collection. That'll start second week in August. I think our first training session will be, I'm just thinking, I know second week's at North Orange. I think first week's at Mount Diablo in August, and then September, second week in Fresno, and then Burbank the third week, San Mateo first week of October, and then we'll be in Sacramento the second week, and then I think it's Vista in San Diego that last week before the summit, and then San Bernardino I want to say third week of November. I think I might have missed some, but I think that covers it. So with that, that's a brain dump since we had time. I'm sure you guys, that was a lot of information to take on, but better hear it now than hear it later, right? Okay. Oh, Salinas in October? Okay, maybe that's a WIOA too, Kristen. Maybe Jay forgot about you guys, but I didn't sign up for a Salinas one for the Cape. That might be a WIOA too. So double check that with Jay Wright. And Bronca said, please repeat about program expenses, estimate, and finals. Do members report CAPE or all braided funds? So since we have a few minutes, so the way it works, CDE needs the program expenses by state funding versus federal funding. Every year in September, they're required to report to the feds the maintenance of effort for the federal WIOA 2 grant. And so by December, they have to give a final report to the Fed. So it doesn't show that they're supplanting federal funds with what should be state funds. So the way this process will work, probably September 1, members will have to provide estimates into NOVA and I think what we'll do is we're looking at combining all the CTE related program areas under one. So it'll be ASC, ABE, ESL, CTE, AWD, and K-12 Success. So you report on those categories, and then you'll give us the hours. We'll give definitions on, what's instructional hours and what are service hours. And I don't think, I still have to see what we've decided, but I don't think we're going to be reporting service hours. So then if you go into the expenditure column, we're just going to focus on things like CAPE funds, WIOA 2 funds, LCFF, jail funds, non-credit apportionment, CalWORKS, Perkins, and I think that's it. Everything else, and then we'll have fees / donation. We'll try to align with the WIOA 2 funding requests, so there's no surprises. And so anything that we owe at 2 asks will have the same definition and the same ask, so you won't have to be doing extra work. So all those other requests that we made, I think you can still report it, but it's not mandatory, and you can use it locally if you want. Otherwise, we're just going to focus on those ones. And so estimates September 1st, and then you'll have 3 months to refine that and give us actuals like by December 1st. We haven't figured out the timing on that yet. Hopefully that helps. Okay. So with that, I'll let, I think everybody's just overloaded and exhausted, and they want me to get off the line and go on vacation early. But I'll let Veronica close it. Thank you so much, Veronica. And Veronica's becoming our TAP expert along with Holly. And so I can't let them go on vacation because who else would mind the store while I'm away? So anyway, take it away, Veronica.
All right. Thank you, Neil. And thank you, everyone, for participating in today's webinar. As we have mentioned, if you have any questions, please be sure to reach out to TAP and we will provide assistance to you. I'm going to close the webinar, and when I do, the evaluation will appear. Please be sure to let us know what you thought about today's webinar and its content, and then also let us know if there are any professional development or technical assistance needs you have at this time. We do use those results to refine and improve our presentations, as well as develop and identify new opportunities for you all. Thank you all so much, and have a great long weekend.